really need better lighting in here. You need to be up close or far away with better lighting. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I have got my coffee here, and I purposely put on the shirt that my brother got me that says, "I'm silently correcting your grammar," because we're going to talk a lot about grammar today. So I have two book reviews that I'm going to combine into this video. These are special book reviews because these are both Christian fiction books that I feel like one of them has been kind of popular in the Christian fiction circles, so I want to address it and talk about it, and I feel like people would be excited to see these reviews. So the two books I'm going to be talking about today are Once I Knew by Victoria Lynn and Behind the Act by Abigayle. And if you've been around the past few months, I've talked about these a lot in my videos, saying that I was going to get around to reading them and just describing what they're about and everything, and I've kind of gotten you all excited for them, so hopefully you've been awaiting this video. And I just realized that my Christmas lights are not on. I need to turn this on. Okay, that's better and way more festive. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So we're going to talk about these two books and kind of compare them because I did read them in a short amount of time. I graduated college with my associate's degree last week, and so I've pretty much been reading nonstop since then and have read through Behind the Act very quickly and had read Once I Knew before that. So let's start off with talking about Once I Knew. I read this around like the Thanksgiving break time. It took me a while to get through. Starting out, I enjoyed it. So basically the story is this girl who lives out in the country in this kingdom where I feel like kind of a cliche story, like the really nice king has died and his son has kind of taken over, but he has like a regent who's ruling who's really evil, and then the son is very self-centered and did not have a great upbringing. So the villagers are living in poverty and really struggling under the rule of this new king. So Violet is one of them, and she lives with her grandma and farms and lives in this tiny little town. And one day this injured kingsman shows up in the forest next to her house, and so she kind of nurses him back to health, but she can't really tell anyone that she has him in her house because she would probably get in trouble with the authorities and they would assume that she did something to hurt him or something along those lines. So there's a lot of fear in there. The storyline was pretty good in the beginning, and I was wondering, okay, where is this going to go? I did start to like figure out what was going to happen, so that was kind of annoying, but it was still an okay storyline, and I didn't mind like the fantasy aspects of it. And then in the beginning, one of the reasons why I really wanted to read this book was because a lot of people talked about the fact that the Christianity was very prevalent in there, and it was part of her life, and I definitely experienced that and enjoyed that part, that there was just Christianity woven throughout. It wasn't some weird climactic part of the story where all of a sudden she remembered that she believed in God, right? It was like every decision that she made in her small everyday life was based off of her understanding of the scripture and of God. So I thought that was really cool. However, I quickly got annoyed with this book because of the editing. Hence the reason I'm wearing this shirt. Because I'm nervous to make this video just because I don't want to be overly critical, but also that is one of the things that bothers me the most. If there is not good editing to a book, and if you cannot have a complete sentence that makes sense, then it's going to be really hard for me to enjoy your book, because that's the most basic thing. Anyone can read your book and edit it and cut out the grammar, but if you can't have that, then you can't really have a good story. So there was just a lot of sentences in here that didn't even make sense. Like they didn't follow from the paragraph. There was no subject or no verb in the sentence. It was so weird. There was also typos. There was one time, I can't remember what it was, but some word that if you just change one letter, it would totally change the whole meaning of the sentence. Oh, something about like, I don't know, like a dumb example, like that does make him look fat, but instead it said that doesn't make him look fat, so it just like totally changed the entire meaning of the sentence. Little things like that that really bothered me. And then at one point, so they're like the house burns down and all the animals escape, right? And so she's laying in the bed and ask, oh, what happened to all the animals, right? And so the person tells her, the animals have been taken to neighboring farms and they're taking care of them for you. It's all good and everything. Fast forward like 50 pages later, and this guy's walking through the forest, and it's like, oh, then the horse ran up to him because it had been missing since the fire at their house. And it just, little inconsistencies like that are really annoying, because I know she had a lot of beta readers and a lot of editors, and they should have been able to catch that, and that just really bothered me. And then the story was just very cliche. The love story was very odd. I felt like it came from nowhere. Like, yes, they were in close quarters together, they were doing life together, and so I know attraction can form out of that and good friendship, right? But it kind of just came out of nowhere, and the resolution at the end was very sudden. I felt like all of a sudden they were very attached to each other. There was also the whole miscommunication trope, which I literally almost threw the book at the wall because that was so annoying. Like, if you're standing there in the same room and you both know you like each other and you're both looking at each other waiting for the other person to say something, but yet then you just go about your everyday life and leave him behind, like, what is wrong with you? Like, can you not just communicate? Also, there's this huge part about God talking to the main guy. It wasn't like explicitly God was talking to him, but it was literally a whole prayer of like what God would say to him. So I'm assuming that was the audible voice of God. Oh, and one of the most annoying things I felt like was how dramatic it was. Like, every little thing that happened, it was like she was gasping for breath, she fainted, the weight was on her shoulders, just constantly unstable. And that just really bothered me, because life isn't like that. Like, you don't always freak out at every little bad thing that happens, and it just bothers you that much. So that just annoyed me. I think the book had good potential, and I was really excited. I did really like the author. It was fun to follow her on Instagram and see her posts, and I did like the Anne of Green Gables challenge with her. But recently she's posted more things about how she doesn't attend a church, and she doesn't believe that you have to have like a pastor or listen to sermons and all that. So I think I can see that in the book, because there wasn't mention of like outside influences on her life. It was just her at home like reading her Bible in this book, so I think it reflected a lot of her life. So I am sad, because I had high hopes for this book and I think it had potential, but there was just mostly the editing that really turned me off, and I will not be reading the next book in this series, and I gave this one 2.5 stars, I think. So after my bad experience with this book, I was pretty scared to pick up Behind the Act. I was actually sent this for free months ago. It's been sitting on my shelf. Anyways, so I was really scared to pick up this book, because I thought, well, here's another independently published book that doesn't look as nice. So I thought it was going to be even worse than Once I Knew, and just not even be a good story. But I was captivated from page 1 of this book. And spoiler alert, I ended up giving this book 5 stars, which is very shocking for a Christian fiction book. Just right off the bat, there was a couple of editing mistakes that I didn't like, but the style of the writing, like Once I Knew was a lot more like monologue. You're in her head, you just hear a lot of her feelings and her thoughts and all that, whereas Behind the Act was much more action, what's actually happening in the story, and it never felt dull. There was always something happening, but yet it didn't feel cliche and like she was forcing the action. I really don't know how to describe it, but it's been a long time since I have wanted to like stay up really late reading a book, which I did a lot when I was reading this one. My sister can testify to that I stayed up till like 11, which is pretty late for me, multiple nights in a row to read this book. And I was really sad when it finished, and honestly I would read it again. Like, the writing was so good, the characters you were connected to. Basically the storyline is Tiffany, who has lost her parents, is living with her grandpa in this small little town that no one knows about, and a kind of like location scout for a movie comes through the town, and he's investigating whether this town would be good for a movie, and she convinces him that they should do the movie there and that she would want to act in it. So she gets a little part in it and figures out that she really likes to act, and so her grandpa says, you know what, do what makes you happy and go and act. And so she becomes this actress, but then everything kind of starts to go wrong, and she realizes that acting is not all she had dreamed that it would be, and so she kind of goes looking for answers, and she goes back to her hometown, and the characters were just so good. I liked Tiffany. Some people were saying like that her anxiety gave them anxiety when they were reading the book, but I thought it did an accurate portrayal of what it's like to live without God and without hope, because she had no foundation and no set like standard for her life. And so whenever something bad would happen or life wasn't going the way that she planned, then it would kind of send her whole world reeling because she didn't have any foundation. So I thought that was really well done. And then you see, you know, towards the end of the book, her character development and more peace without fully spoiling the story for you. But then you have other characters like Hayes, who is her boyfriend, and I really enjoyed his character and just his steadiness throughout. And then Christopher is kind of like the dorky teenage boy that comes in and kind of doesn't care about social graces, so he speaks his mind, and he was really fun. And whenever he shows up later on in her life, and you just see how he's gotten to grow up, and his life later on was just so neat and really like almost made me want to cry just seeing like how happy his life was. So I know this seems like a weird review to a lot of you, that this modern Christian fiction book that is not very popular would be a 5-star read for me, but I really did enjoy it, and I enjoyed that it was clean. There was a couple of kisses in it, and obviously there is the relationship between Hayes and Tiffany, but there was no description of it. There was absolutely no like admiring of his muscles or his shoulders or whatever all these Christian fiction books include. This was just so marvelously written, and I would be excited to go read some of her other stuff. I often do that. Like, I really like the author, so I go pick up some of her other stuff and then it disappoints me. So I don't know if I'll do that right away because I just love this book so much and I want it to just like stay fresh and have a sweet spot in my heart. Something I forgot to mention about this is that she wrote it to be considered a clean book, but I felt like the mentions of like the Kingsmen being really evil people who always want to take what they want was a little bit too much. There was a couple of scenes where the man is just standing over her and threatening her, and I think there was a little bit too much innuendo there throughout the book. So I wouldn't recommend it to a younger audience, which I thought was sad that it would just be that intense. So between these two books that I have that are modern fiction books, I enjoyed Behind the Act way better and would recommend that people read it, but I would not recommend Once I Knew. Sadly, I thought this was interesting just to be able to branch out and read some really small name books that I wouldn't typically read, but it's been fun to branch out and read different things, and I've seen a lot of other booktubers that I follow reading books similar to this, so it's fun to be able to join that conversation. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will be back here next week for some more reviews. I only have 11 books left on my challenge for the year, so Lord willing, I will finish up 100 books this year and be able to come with a full recap video at the end of the year. So I will see you guys next week. Bye!